We live in a new age, and it's time for us to upgrade our tinfoil hats. Operation Tinfoil is a freedom-focused small business and trusted sponsor of this show. Their super comfortable new line of beanies and baseball caps will not only crown your skull in style, but each of these dome defenders is lined with a silver mesh that blocks up to 99% of EMF radiation from cell phone towers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and yes, even 5G. We don't know what EMF radiation does to the brain long term, but neither do they, so don't be their guinea pig and don't wait around to find out. Get your stylish tinfoil hat of the future today at gettinfoil.com. Use the promo code SYSTEM for $10 off your order. Again, that's gettinfoil.com. Use the promo code SYSTEM for $10 off your order. Have you or a loved one been injured by some fuck nuggets, reckless driving, a tumble at your shitty job, or some other form of dumb shit outside of your control? Well, fear not, because today's episode is sponsored by a lawyer. Lone Star Injury Attorneys is an award-winning personal injury law firm that achieves maximum results for its injured clients. Max the Axe is not just a lawyer, but a hardcore Mises Caucus libertarian and also a big supporter of this show and all of our bullshit. Max is the best personal injury lawyer in Texas, but don't judge him by his occupation or location. Max is an avid defender of liberty and justice in whatever state you got fucked in. If you've been injured and your ass needs saving, go with the pros at Lone Star Injury Attorneys. Visit LoneStarInjuryAttorneys.com or Google Max the Axe. Consultations are free and you don't pay a single dime unless you win. Once again, go to LoneStarInjuryAttorneys.com and get your ass covered.
We are here at the Libertarian Convention of North Carolina with Jacob Hornberger. Jacob, how are you doing, sir?
Thank you, Dan. Great. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for being here. Now, as I said before we started recording, I'm going for more like humanizing people and more about like getting to know who they are. And so we've just been starting these interviews out with, what is your favorite song ever?
True Love Waves by Buddy Holly. I think that is the most beautiful song that has ever been written. And I love Buddy Holly.
How come? What is it about that song?
I really don't know. I didn't know about Buddy Holly when I was growing up, and I didn't really discover him till much later in my life. Like maybe I was in my 40s when I discovered Buddy Holly. Mm-hmm. But when I discovered his music and then discovered that he had died at such a young age, at about 22 or something like that, I was stunned. But I listened to all his songs, and then Dylan had a big impact on me as well. Mm-hmm. But it really goes back to Buddy Holly. And when I learned that he had influenced the Beatles and as well as Bob Dylan and other people that have played a big role in my life musically, I thought, okay, I'm on the right track because I love this guy. But I can't tell you why. His music it speaks to me.
Yeah, very cool. I like it. Now, in I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot today. In this race, this isn't your first time running for president. You ran back in, it was 2016, right? 2020. So against Joe Jorgensen. What it brought you back? What made you want to run again after that experience the first time?
Well, I wanted to finish what I'd started 3 years ago, and I really object to this reform-oriented message that has come to define our party for 20 years now, and what I call Republican light. Reform Social Security, reform Medicare, reform immigration, reform the drug war, just reform. Mm-hmm. Because I don't believe that reform is freedom. I'm in this because I want to be free, and that's been my quest ever since I discovered libertarianism in my late 20s. I want to live the life of a free man and the one life that God gave me. And reform is not freedom because it leaves these infringements on freedom intact. To achieve freedom, you got to dismantle infringements on freedom.
Yeah. Well,
the predominant sentiment of the party is reform. It has been for 20 years.
When you say Republican light, is it just Republican light, or do you mean like, would you say that you lean more left and the Libertarian Party's gone too right, or?
No, I lean libertarian.
Okay.
Genuine, pure libertarian principles. Open borders. Abolish Social Security and Medicare. And all other socialist programs. Legalize all drugs, including fentanyl and the rest of them. Dismantle the national security state. Separate school and state. What I'm referring to is this propensity over the last 20 years to target Republicans for votes with things like school vouchers that leave public schooling intact, or try to take over the public schools to show Americans that libertarians can run socialism better than Democrats or Republicans. Keep Social Security intact. All of my opponents want to keep Social Security intact for the next 25 years.
Yeah.
That's not freedom. You know, at my age, I'm not interested in socialism for the next 25 years. I want freedom now.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about this. And immigration controls, another example. They all favor America's system of immigration controls, my opponents, in one form or another. That's not freedom. Freedom is the dismantling of all infringements on freedom, including restrictions on the free movements of goods, services, and people across borders. So I figured I lost last time.
Yeah.
Fair and square, Joe beat me, but she ends up with 1% of the vote.
Yeah.
And we're now back where the polls are showing we either get 0% or 1%. And my contention is it's because of this message. There is no constituency for this message, but a message of pure principle, I contend, can achieve a breakout of some 10 to 15%.
So you think that Jo Jorgensen, her main issue is that she didn't go pure libertarian enough, and if she had, she would have done how much better?
Absolutely. That she holds the standard reform-oriented message, reform Social Security, reform healthcare, reform education, and bring all the troops home. But then she wanted to have a garrison state, a well-armed Switzerland, as she called
One
it.
giant Switzerland. Yes.
Exactly, but an armed one, a
Yes.
garrison state.
Armed and neutral.
I would say dismantle the whole national security state.
Okay.
Pentagon, CIA, and NSA, and restore a limited government republic with just a small basic military force.
And if she had done that, you think she would have done better?
And there is no question in my mind that this is the only way to achieve a breakout. For 20 years, we've been taught that our principles are albatrosses. They're negatives. They cost us votes.
Mm-hmm.
I have maintained the exact opposite. Our principles, if we adhere to them totally, it's got to be a complete package, because the electorate will not vote for reform. We know this. She got 1%. The polls right now are saying 0 to 1% because people are expecting us to do the same thing we've done for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm saying if you want a breakout, there's only one way you're going to do that. And when I say breakout, I'm talking about 10 to 15%, and that's run a campaign of pure principle.
Yeah. So Jo Jorgensen did not run principledly enough to get the 10% that you're talking about, but she did beat you in the party that is for those principles. So how does that work? Like when you expand that beyond the party, how does it start working more than it does within the Libertarian Party? You see what I'm saying? Like if it didn't get the Libertarians to vote for you over Jo Jorgensen here, why is it going to get the people out there to vote for you over Donald Trump?
Because the sentiment in the party over the last 20 years has been that if we water down the principles to reform levels, where we don't scare people by wanting to abolish Social Security immediately, which is what I stand for, and Medicare, get rid of the socialism immediately. The idea was that we could garner votes of people out there like seniors that would now vote for us, or Republicans. You hear this phrase, the party of Ron Paul, from some of the candidates.
Yeah.
Well, this is not the party of Ron Paul. The Republican Party was where Ron got that big surge of votes.
Sure.
So there's been this fantasy that if we target Republicans with this reform message, we can get those Ron Paul voters.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that there is a constituency out there that will vote for the pure package of libertarianism in a big way. Let me give you a real-life example of this. 20 years ago, I ran for U.S. Senate in Virginia with this same set of principles that I'm enunciating today: open borders, abolish Social Security, Medicare, public schooling, separate school and state, the whole
shebang.
package. Yeah,
Libertarian 101.
that's right.
Yeah.
I garner 7% of the statewide vote. This is 20 years ago when most people didn't even know what libertarianism was.
Yeah.
All right, Democrats were not running against running an opponent. I was running against one of the most popular senators in Virginia history, John Warner, chairman of the Armed Services Committee. This is right after the 9/11 attacks, when I was saying what Ron Paul would say 6 years later, that the motivating factor behind those attacks was U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
Democrats didn't run anybody, but I didn't get any Democrat votes. I have no doubts about it because I'm calling for the abolition of public schooling, Social Security, Medicare. I'm attacking Democrats like I'm attacking Republicans. I garner 7% of the statewide vote. No Senate candidate today can do that with a reform message because there is a constituency out there that loves this set of principles and will vote for it even if they won't join the party.
Sure. Who do you think that constituency is currently voting for that you're polling from? Are they just silently out there waiting for you to say these things?
I think a big part of them are.
Yeah.
You've got 50% of people that don't vote.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why they're not voting, because they know the whole system stinks. It doesn't matter whether they vote for Biden or Trump, they're going to get the same thing.
I agree with that.
I think the black vote, I've said this for 30 years in this party, is up for grabs, and that libertarians should be targeting the black vote because of this Jim Crow called the drug war. This is the most racist government program since segregation. When I ran for U.S. Senate, as I mentioned a minute ago, I went and saw and met with one of the most prominent black ministers in the nation. He was elected to the African American Hall of Fame. And I sat down with him. He didn't know me from Adam. And I said, Pastor Peterson, this is my platform. Open the borders, abolish the welfare state, and the whole gamut. And at the end of that, he said to me, Mr. Hornberger, I'm going to endorse your candidacy and take this letter of endorsement to every black minister in this state. And I did.
Did you do
and
it?
I have no doubts that the lion's share of my 107,000 votes or 106,000 votes came from blacks, also from Hispanics. The attitude in this party is if we support immigration controls, that's a vote getter. It's actually a vote loser. 0 votes for every single one of my opponents on this basis. Why? Because every right-wing advocate of immigration controls is going to vote for Donald Trump or Bobby Kennedy, who also wants to seal the border. He's not about to waste his vote on a libertarian presidential candidate that favors immigration controls. I favor open borders.
Joe Biden seems pretty in favor of open borders.
I'm sorry?
Joe Biden seems pretty in favor of
On
open
the
borders.
contrary, on the total contrary.
I mean, he says that he's not, but then he allows it to happen. So
On the contrary, absolute contrary, I contradict what you just said.
go ahead.
This man favors the police state along the border. He's already sending troops down there.
Mm-hmm.
The police state, which I've been experienced, I've lived half my life on the border, or did live almost half my life on the border, consists of warrantless searches along the border, highway checkpoints, this Berlin Wall, the concertina wire now, death, suffering, rapes, kidnappings, and so forth. And this man is enforcing it. What is perceived to be his propensity for so-called open borders, which is ridiculous, is that their system isn't working, Dan. It's never worked. I've seen this crisis all my life. It has never worked. And the failure of their system is what they're saying is open borders. It's ridiculous. Their system will never work.
Didn't Joe Biden say you can come in? Like he's been very, at least at the beginning, he's been more backpedaling it now. But at the beginning, he was pretty open border at the beginning of his campaign, whether or not he actually did it or not.
Oh, no. He is not open borders. Anybody who favors a police state is not open borders. Let me explain what open borders really means. Open borders means the abolition of the Border Patrol, the abolition of the Immigration Service, the abolition of all restrictions on the free movements of people across borders. It's essentially what we have today. I drove from Virginia to North Carolina. Yeah. When I crossed the border, I didn't see anybody. I didn't even know there was a line there until I saw "Welcome to North Carolina."
Sure.
That's open borders, okay? Joe Biden believes in a police state that maybe he favors using this police state to let in more immigrants as compared to Trump's position or Kennedy's position or DeSantis' position of totally sealing the border like North Korea. But the fact that you want your immigration control system to let in more people is simply a variation of plans. It's not a variation of principle. They all believe in this immigration control system, and they all favor the police state that comes with it. And by the way, all of my opponents favor this system too in one form or another. For example, we've got one of my opponents that mimics Trump and DeSantis. He wants to seal the border. He wants to finish the Berlin Wall.
Name names, it's fine. Josh Smith is a coward for not being here. It's okay to say.
Well, on the other end of the spectrum, there's those that take the Biden approach. Mm-hmm. Let's keep government in charge, but let's let in more immigrants.
Sure.
Okay, well, let is the operative word. When you hear the word let, you're not talking freedom.
Yeah. So let's not restrict anybody from coming in.
Absolutely. Just like we have between the states.
Sure. Now, in the past, in your last run, you were the Mises Caucus endorsed candidate. Why didn't you get the Mises Caucus endorsement this time? What do you think changed between then and now?
That's a fascinating question. When the selection process took place 3 years ago, it was very interesting. They had a committee that interviewed the candidates. Mm-hmm. And I remember going through this interview process. I wanted to win this nomination. I mean, this is Ludwig von Mises' caucus, who's one of my heroes. I mean, Mises deeply inspired my life. So when I went through this interview process, I felt confident because they asked me, what books have you read? Well, I've read almost every book by Mises, not all of them, but most of them. And Misesian economics has played a big role in my life. So it was a big honor to win that nomination, that endorsement of the Mises caucus. This time around, they didn't have that process. I mean, I was going to enter it again. And the next thing I knew, Rechtenwald had been chosen. And every time I asked somebody, how did this happen? The answer was, well, Michael Heiss chose him because they had designated Dave Smith to be their endorsee. But again, there was never a vetting process from what I could tell. Yeah. And the next thing I knew was, well, they've selected Rechtenwald. So you'd have to ask Heiss how this happened because I never got a chance to vie for the endorsement again.
Yeah. Well, they do seem to be a little bit more closed borders or not completely open borders, and they seem to be a little bit more pro-life, I guess. Do the principles conflict? I'm not saying either is more or less libertarian, but do you think that there's a difference in, has your view changed or has their view changed, or what do you think?
Well, that's a fascinating question, too, because my views haven't changed over the last 30 years. Yeah. I mean, I adhere strictly to libertarian principles. I believe that our principles are our greatest asset and that we should be going to battle with these principles. But they do endorse Rechtenwald, who has written at least one article saying he wants to seal the border and finish the Berlin Wall down there. I mean, he doesn't call it a Berlin Wall, but that's what it is. He wants to do these things. He's now backing off, apparently, from that particular position, but he is a strong advocate of immigration controls, and I can only gather that Michael Heiss feels the same way. He's very strong, and there's others, Dave Smith and Clint Russell, that are part of this coterie of people supporting Rechtenwald that are fierce. They're like DeSantis and Trump. And
they're fierce in what way do you mean?
Fierce in terms of immigration controls, which to me is just immigration socialism. I mean, there is no question this is a socialist system. It's based on central planning, government central planning, which, as Mises pointed out, always leads to planned chaos. This is the cause of the crisis, and they don't understand that.
Yeah, not to get too deeply into the weeds on the immigration stuff, but if the borders are open, like if the government does not control the land or the flow of people or the goods and services, the government saying that you can go onto this private property, who owns the property at that point? And if it's the people, do the people get to decide whether or not they have immigration?
Well, what we're talking about is, under today's system, there's no question that illegal immigrants are trespassing onto private farms and ranches. Yeah. I mean, I knew this. I grew up on a farm on the Rio Grande. We had illegal immigrants crossing onto our farm, trespassing. And the reason they did that is because of this system of immigration controls. You're never going to stop people from saving their families. They're going to do whatever they can to save their families or improve their lives, and they're going to be crossing at some point. The reason they're crossing at private farms and ranches is because it's illegal to cross at the regular crossing point, the international bridge. Yeah. If you legalize it all, it's like the drug war. How do you get rid of the drug war crisis? You legalize drugs. So it's the same with the immigration crisis. How do you get rid of the crisis? You legalize the free movements of people across borders. Now they cross at the international bridge, or they get on a plane and land at an airport in the United States, or they take the train, or whatever. They drive across. Now all of a sudden you're talking about using the government-owned means of transport, the highways, the streets, whatever, to get to private property. I mean, that's what roads do. They connect private property. And so immigrants come and they get jobs because American employers love to hire them. They're hard workers. Yeah. Or they rent, or they buy at Walmart. Have you ever seen a sign at Walmart that says, "We don't want to serve illegal immigrants"?
I've not.
Never. They want customers.
Yeah.
And that's the way open immigration works. They don't have to change your citizenship. Just people come in, and you wouldn't even know who was a citizen. Yeah. You wouldn't care, you know?
Yeah, I like it on paper, and I'm with you. Like as far as like the idea on paper, but in actual practice, I have concerns. But again, I don't want to spend too much time on that because it's an exhausted topic. It's an important one to discuss, though. You have I've seen you. I've watched you in several of the other debates, and you've alluded to conspiracy theorists, like when talking about things like COVID and stuff like that. You've called the other candidates conspiracy theorists as though that's pejorative, which it commonly is. And it's fine, but you have also talked about JFK in the past, and you disagree with the mainstream narratives on a lot of things. So I'm curious your thoughts on just like conspiracy theories versus like the establishment narrative, or like where you land on that.
Okay, well, let me first say that I've never called anybody a conspiracy theorist. What I've suggested is they have this notion that the COVID virus was caused either in Wuhan or at the CIA headquarters in Langley or a CIA headquarters, which is fine. If that's what they believe, but they've acquired that generally from the conspiracy sites on the internet.
Like what?
I don't delve into those.
Okay.
But that's where you find this stuff. I don't know of any books, but there may be. But what they took me to task is that I don't delve into this. Now, if that's what they want to do, and some of them have done it for 4 years now, that's great. It's not for me. What I believe is that you've got to get government out of healthcare, and that's where they oppose me, because they want to keep government in charge of healthcare. They just want their people in the places of power. They want the anti-vaxxers in charge of the Centers for Disease Control or the FDA or the state regulatory agencies. My position is we have to raise people's vision to a higher level. And what is freedom? Freedom is not delving into who caused the virus, whether it's conspiracy based in Moscow or Wuhan or Langley or wherever. Freedom is the separation of healthcare in the state, getting government entirely out of this area so that government can't do these bad things.
Yeah.
That's my position. Now, you talked about the JFK assassination, which is very interesting because I have delved into this area. And I'm a lawyer by training. I practiced law for 12 years as a litigator, both criminal and civil. Mm-hmm. I don't deal with theories. I look at evidence. And that's where I took some of these guys to task on the COVID thing.
Have you looked at the evidence for the COVID stuff? Like, is it just that you haven't looked at the evidence as much? Because you said that you haven't looked into it that much. With the JFK stuff, you seem to be more into, because you've looked at the evidence, you're more open to what people like the mainstream would call the conspiracy theory. Is it possible that you just haven't looked into the COVID stuff enough to be the conspiracy theorist that they are?
Anything's possible, absolutely. But you see, what they're pointing at is abuse of power.
Yeah.
Once you vest government with power, then you can't sit there and say, oh my gosh, boo-hoo-hoo, they abuse their power. That's why I keep saying that the ultimate answer to this is remove the power. This is what our founding fathers did with religion. They separated church and state. Yep. Instead of trying to figure out, how should state churches be run, just get government out of the religion business. And so my mind orients not to, okay, who caused the thing? Did it originate in Wuhan or whatever? Or at the state level. A lot of these guys are state sovereignty people. They want to vest sovereignty in state governments, omnipotent power. You do that, and you have to assume that your worst enemies are going to exercise this power, which they did with healthcare. And so they may well be right, but you can't. I kept asking Clint in that debate, I said, if you have evidence that somebody's committed murder, take it to a grand jury.
Yeah.
That's our system. You can't just punish people. There was one guy on stage that wanted to send the guys to Guantanamo, which is really weird because
Toad or Josh?
Huh?
Toad or Josh? Be more
Toad.
Okay.
Toad.
Be more specific about the degenerates that you're talking about.
Toad.
Okay. Call them out. It's fine.
No, I don't believe anybody's degenerate. Okay.
I do. Toad.
But what I'm saying is that when somebody says, I want to send people to Guantanamo, he's saying, I don't want trials,
Sure.
I want to punish them, and I believe in the national security establishment, and I believe in this torture center in Guantanamo Bay, which a lot of right-wingers do, including in this party. I'm totally opposed to all that.
Yeah.
But when somebody abuses power, that's not a criminal offense. When somebody in power says, I want to lock down, I'm going to order a lockdown. If that's within the sovereign prerogative powers of the state, there's no
powers
criminal
of the state that the state created for the state, and if they, as long as they are adhering to their own rules, then can't do anything about it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And these guys want to punish him regardless of the fact that they haven't committed a criminal offense. Yeah. They've just abused their powers that they believe investing in the state because they're sovereignty state people. Yeah. What I'm saying is remove the power, and then you don't have this abuse. Now, you're right. On JFK, I was very skeptical for many years, read a lot of books, because I think in terms of evidence. If you have, and this is what I was telling these guys, if you got evidence, show me the evidence, okay? With JFK, I was skeptical. I finally got to the point where I was convinced that this was a national security state operation. But what clinched it from me from a legal standpoint was the autopsy. Yeah. Once I realized that there was a fraudulent autopsy conducted by the military on the night of the assassination, that was case closed for me, because there is no innocent explanation for a fraudulent autopsy. So there is your evidence of complicity. It's not a theory. It's based on evidence. You know, when I go into court, or when I used to go into court, I didn't talk in terms of theories. I talked in terms of evidence. The evidence is going to establish this. And that's the difference here between the JFK assassination and the idea that it originated in Wuhan or Langley or whatever. They may well be right, but I haven't seen them prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt here.
Where have you listened to Clint's podcast or anything to see if he has proved it beyond a reasonable doubt?
No,
dug into it?
No, I've never been interested in his podcast, but I've read other articles by people that have made this claim, and I have never seen anything beyond a reasonable doubt that this. I don't even know what Clint's conclusion is, whether it's Wuhan or CIA or Lang.
Is there anything close to a reasonable doubt that?
What is it? What is his conclusion?
I'm not entirely sure what his. The idea that it was man-made in general. Do you think that it was man-made? Do you think that it was not what the mainstream media tells us?
I don't know. I just have not seen anybody make a case closed beyond a reasonable doubt case on any of these positions. If there is, I'd love to see it.
Sure. I agree with you. If there is beyond a reasonable doubt argument, I'm all for it. But if there's any reasonable doubt, isn't that important to look into as well? If there's any doubt, isn't that, especially as libertarian-minded, free-thinking people who reject the mainstream media, shouldn't we look into that and find out anything?
Absolutely. I have no problems with people investigating anything. More power to them. My position is, okay, suppose it does originate in a lab in Wuhan, China. How's that going to bring me freedom here at home? Well, we're going to attack China? We're going to drop a nuclear bomb on them for doing that?
So we just shouldn't care about it?
I'm saying the focus should always be, what do we need to do to achieve a free society at home?
Assuming that we have another COVID next year, because they try to push us every 6 months or so with all the new versions that they've made up. If it comes back around again, are you going to look into it more then? As the candidate, are you going to be more skeptical on it? Or I think that's kind of what Clint was going for. It seemed like, isn't it worth looking into? Isn't it worth having a grounded theory on this to some degree as somebody who's speaking for people?
What I'm saying is you can investigate all you want, and you can reach whatever conclusions you want, and that's not going to bring you a free society. Okay. My focus is on freedom. The only way to achieve a free society is the separation of healthcare and the state. Get the state entirely out of healthcare. Once you accomplish that, they can't do bad things to you anymore. They can't do lockdowns. Now, if they're over there deliberately at Langley, at the CIA headquarters, coming up with a virus, this is what I keep saying. Concentrate on dismantling the CIA. You see, this is what these guys don't think in terms of. They favor the national security state. They want Guantanamo Bay. They want the military establishment down there. I say, dismantle the national security state. I'm the only candidate that emphasizes this. I'm the only candidate in this race that has made a track record of this. I wrote a book called The Evil of the National Security State. Yeah. You dismantle that, there is nobody left to create these viruses, Dan. And then you separate healthcare in the state, where the state cannot do lockdowns anymore. You got a constitutional amendment that says no law shall be enacted by the federal or state governments respecting the regulation of healthcare. Now we're talking about freedom. That way you don't have the agencies that are creating these viruses anymore, and you don't have the agencies that can do the bad things with the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and so forth. That's the freedom message that we should never lose focus on, and that I am not losing focus on in my life, because I want to live the life of a free man.
Sure. Now, let's say we separate healthcare and state. Like you've spoken toward abolishing the CDC, which is definitely arguably libertarian. But let's say we get rid of the CDC, we get rid of any government involvement in any of these regulations in any way whatsoever, and we have, be it man-made or be it natural, we have another COVID pandemic. Because you were talking about this during COVID last time. If we got rid of the CDC in the middle of COVID, or we got rid of, if the COVID official narrative is real even, and we got rid of the CDC in the middle of it, does that not leave people just high and dry to deal with their, how does that work exactly? You get rid of the CDC in the middle of a pandemic, whether it's a conspiracy theory like creation or whether it's natural. What do people do at that point?
They manage their own lives. I mean, you see, there's this notion that we need government to be controlling our lives, managing our lives, taking care of us, keeping us safe. This government is the greatest killer government in history. Martin Luther King pointed that out. The greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And we're putting our faith in the government to take care of us? You get rid of the CDC, you get rid of the FDA, you get rid of all these things, and now people are managing their own lives. They're going to their doctors. They're deciding, should I take a vaccine or not take a vaccine?
But how do people in their own lives determine whether or not a vaccine is trustworthy? I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm not saying it's government. I'm saying, what is the answer? Like, if it's not somebody at the higher ups who are saying this vaccine works or it doesn't work, who gets to determine that? Do we just trial and error, or how does that work?
Adults make these determinations. You see, we're
trial and error?
We're a nation of child adults. We're a nation of children, because we're looking to our daddy to make these decisions. This is not a life that is 100% secure, Dan.
But how do you know what even the product is that you're purchasing?
Well, how do you determine on any product? You've got certification agencies, Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval, Underwriters Laboratory that is out there saying, we recommend this. And then you make your own decision. You go to your family physician. What do you think about this vaccine? Well, I think it's fine. Well, let me get a second opinion. And then you take your chances and you make your own decision as an adult. There's nothing secure about life.
So it's like Yelp?
But there's
like people give reviews, they take the vaccine?
Absolutely. You make your own decisions and you do your own research and you act like an adult, like a grown-up. And you don't look to government to be your daddy. And most of all, at the state level, most of the lockdowns took place at the state level. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you get rid of the state agencies that have the authority to do this. That's the problem. It's not that they abused power, which they obviously did. I mean, I oppose those lockdowns just as much as anybody else. Yeah. But I'm sitting back watching this whole thing for 4 years, and the whole focus of the COVID people here in the movement is, oh, the lockdowns are bad, the lockdowns are bad, the vaccines are bad, the vaccines are bad. Hardly ever did they say, we need to get government out of this entirely at the state level. Once you get government out of it, you don't have to worry about this anymore. Yeah. But that means adults handling their own decisions. You know, freedom brings out the best in mankind. You know why we're a nation of child adults? Because we've got a welfare state that takes care of us. This is why we have the strongest government in history and the weakest nation, the weakest people. We've got people that are scared of their own shadows. They're scared of viruses. They're scared of the terrorists, of the illegal immigrants, the so-called invaders, the terrorists, the Muslims. Look at this. I mean, Americans are among the most frightened people in the world. Yeah. And the reason is because you've got a government that's operating as our daddy.
Okay. So without healthcare or without like government-involved healthcare, would it just be crowd-funded, or you're saying get the government out of the way, they can't be your daddy? What do people need to do to like fund their, I don't know, their ingrown toenail surgery? Do they just beg their neighbors for money, or how does it work exactly?
Okay. I grew up, all of us have grown up under Social Security. Uh-huh. And so the temptation, including right here in this party, among my opponents for this nomination, is that if you abolish this program immediately, which I favor, there'd be people dying in the streets. pure nonsense, pure nonsense. This country had lived without Social Security and Medicare for over 100 years, and there were nobody was dying in the streets as a result.
But they weren't coming out of having it to going to not having it.
Well, that's the thing, is that this is how insidious this philosophy is of socialism. Once you're on the dole, like a narcotic, you think, oh my gosh, I can't survive without this thing. Bull. Everybody can survive without a narcotic, and this is the insidious nature of this thing. Okay, but I am one of those that grew up before Medicare was enacted in the 60s.
Yeah.
I grew up in the poorest city in the United States. That's what the Census Bureau told us, Laredo, Texas. Nobody had major medical insurance. Why? Because healthcare costs were low and stable. It was like going to the grocery store. You just pay cash.
Yeah.
Okay. The doctor's offices in Laredo were filled with people every day, including people from Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, where there was even more poverty. The doctors knew that half the patients, if not more, could not pay a bill.
Yeah.
There is not one instance where a doctor turned any patient away for inability to pay. They treated everybody. We had one hospital, Mercy Hospital, a Catholic hospital, that relied on donations. This is genuine charity.
Right.
Okay.
So when like these social security programs go away, you think that the cost of these things will go down so far because of the free market. I'm just trying to make sure I understand your point here. The costs will go down so far that they will have their income tax taken away and all that, and then it will just even out to where they can afford it. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Medicare and Medicaid destroyed what had been the finest healthcare system in history, with low, stable prices and innovations every day. Doctors love what they did. A lot of doctors even made house calls. You bring in this massive socialist program that operates as a major demand, supposedly to help people, poor, the seniors. It wasn't necessary because doctors were working with people and prices were low. You get rid of the major cause of this crisis, and this is one of my big beefs with my opponents. They want to keep Medicare and Medicaid intact and reform it with health savings accounts or direct medical care, all this bull nonsense. Yes, you get rid of this socialism, healthcare costs would plummet. The crisis would be over. And for those that are truly needy, that freedom brings out the best in mankind. That's where the voluntary charity comes in from doctors, hospitals, healthcare providers that would undoubtedly help out others in need.
Yeah. I like it. So we're going to wrap up here in just a bit, but I want to know, like, with this debate tomorrow, is there anything that you're hoping to get out of it? I know that, like, libertarians have their drama and their backs and forths and everything. Is there anything that you want to get out of the way or anything that you hope to, clear up?
Well, I think that the main message that I wish to bring, and this format is very interesting. I think it's a very, very good format for this debate where they're giving each candidate 10 minutes to give a talk, because I think the candidate can then lay forth his vision for what he wants as a candidate rather than these little 2-minute answers where it's very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
But the main thrust of my message is that this reform message that has come to define this party and that defeated me 3 years ago, there's no question about it, and I'm swimming upstream again. I mean, this is the dominant sentiment in this party is reform, keep Social Security, keep Medicare, keep immigration controls and so forth. I mean, I feel like those salmon in the Northwest, But my main message is this reform is not freedom. I mean, I'm at an age where I'm not interested in a 25-year plan for ending socialism.
It's like, do it or don't do it. Like,
no, do it.
Right.
Because I want freedom.
Yeah.
But the second message I intend to bring is that this reform message can't garner votes. It's incapable of garnering votes. There's no constituency out there for it. Joe got 1%. The 2 Wall Street Journal polls that just came out recently, 1%. If things haven't changed in 3 years, among the electorate, they're not going to change over the next 9 months. People do not like this message out there. Libertarians like this message. Republicans like this message. But constituents to vote Libertarian are not out there. The latest poll from California State University now puts us at 0%.
So are you saying libertarians like it, Republicans like it, only Democrats don't like it?
Democrats like their socialism and statism. They love Social Security. They love Medicare and so forth. But I'm talking about the message of reform, like school vouchers, health savings accounts, immigration reform. Republicans love these things.
Yeah.
Okay. But Republicans are going to vote for Republicans. The party of Ron Paul that the Ron Paul voters are never going to cross party lines to vote for us. We have to find our own block of voters that are as passionately committed to us as Donald Trump's voters are for him, or that Bobby Kennedy's voters are for him. And they're out there. There's no question in my mind that those passionate people will vote for us, but only if we adhere to our principles 100%. They will not vote for reform. We know that. We know that from experience. We get the 1% or 2% after 50 years of this party's existence with this reform message. Doesn't have to be, Dan. Yeah. We can achieve a breakout of 10 to 15%. There's no doubt in my mind. Double what I did 20 years ago in that U.S. Senate race, but only by running a campaign of principle for the party of principle.
So if you get the nomination, is there somebody that you want to be your second in command to help you get to that 12%?
Well, ideally, I would love to have somebody that feels the exact same way I do, that our principles are our greatest asset, and that we need to go into battle against these Democrats and Republicans, these people that have destroyed our freedom by
Josh Smith,
by
Toad, Michael Rectenwald. Any names?
All of my opponents are reform-oriented. They favor immigration controls. They favor this system and the police state that comes with this system. Uh-huh. Now, they may vary on various aspects, like some might oppose the wall or somebody might oppose highway checkpoints, but the fact is the police state comes with this. They all favor this off-ramp of continuing Social Security and presumably Medicare for the next 25 years. Yeah. I want somebody that has the same conviction that I do, that our principles are our greatest asset, and let's go into battle with those principles.
Shut it down. I like it. As far as like the people at large, like the voters, not just libertarians in this this particular race, but the people at large, what do you think Americans' biggest issue is, and what would you do to resolve their issue?
I think the burning issue, if not the biggest issue, is immigration. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are people along the border, and I know this. I lived almost half my life along the border. They are angry. They're horrified with the stealing of their property to build this wall. They hate the Border Patrol. They have more affinity to people in Mexico oftentimes because the borderlands were part of Mexico. They were part of the Spanish Empire. Mm-hmm. My hometown of Loretto is 98% Mexican-American when I was growing up. Most of the conversations are in Spanish. And I think that we have the opportunity in this party to ignite that flame out, to ignite those embers out there, because this party has stood for open borders for 50 years. Mm-hmm. And igniting that flame can start this wildfire across America. I think, obviously, the inflation is a big issue. Some of my opponents just want to reduce inflation. I want to separate money in the state entirely, restore sound money through the free market. But here's the other one, the drug war. I think, as I said earlier, blacks will come with us libertarians if they understand that we are fiercely committed against this Jim Crow. And that's what it is. It's Jim Crow. In fact, there's a great book by a black academician named Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, where she refers us to the drug war. And every black in America knows this is the most racist government program since segregation. Whites don't realize it. So I think concentrating
Isn't calling them blacks racist?
I'm sorry?
Isn't calling them blacks racist? Not to interject.
No,
I'm sorry.
It's not.
Okay. All right, just making sure.
No.
Some people think it is.
Well, whatever people think is fine, but blacks called themselves blacks. Yeah. And we've got to go to them and make them understand that we sympathize with what's happening here. They've undergone decades of oppression with this war. Blacks get disproportionately higher jail sentences. They get higher rate of stops and searches and seizures from cops. Now, I'm not saying that every judge and every cop's a bigot, but darn sure there are bigots in there, and they use the drug war to exercise this. If they see the ferocity by which we oppose this war, they will join up with us. I have absolutely no doubts about that.
Okay. So, final question. Thank you for being here, first of all. But the final question is, do you know who Dave Casey is? He's a friend of mine. He says you keep ducking him for an interview, and I told him I would ask you if you would give him an interview, or why you don't want to. I don't know. I don't know all the specifics, but do you know who that is?
I have absolutely no idea what you're
Libertarians, they're really full of themselves. It's fine.
Look, I am so flooded with emails that it's very possible that I overlooked this guy's email. I would love to go on his show. I don't know him. I may have met him like you, you know. I do so many of these things or have that they all run together.
I never remember anybody unless they're running for president, basically. So
please tell him to contact me again. I'm not ducking it, I promise.
No
worries.
And
I'll be happy to do the interview.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Look into that camera. Tell them any final thoughts you have, where they can find you, or anything else you want.
My website is jacobforliberty.com, where you will find the most principled, uncompromising message on liberty in this party. And I think it's time that we do some real soul searching in this party. You know, we've gone nowhere with this reform message. We get the standard 1%, and the polls are already reflecting that. If things haven't changed over the last 3 years, they're not going to change unless we change directions in this party. And I am convinced we can achieve a major breakout of 10 to 15%, but only by restoring the original founding principles of this party: open borders, abolish socialism, including Social Security and Medicare and all other socialist programs, legalize all drugs, and on and on. We do that. If we go into battle against these people who have destroyed our freedom, as who we are, libertarians, with our principles, I have no doubts that we can lead America to the highest reaches of freedom, peace, prosperity, and harmony that mankind has ever seen. Let's go into battle and let's seize the day against these people.
Where can they find you? Did you say?
I'm sorry?
Your website?
jacobforliberty.com.
Awesome. Jacob, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Good luck out there.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe on your way out and help us change the world one uncomfortable conversation at a time. And if you like what you hear and you want to hear more, go join the Downers Club at patreon.com/thesystemsdown for bonus episodes of the show every single week. Until next time, please continue to question everything, stay uncomfortable, and I'll talk to you then. Thanks.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.